Welcome to WAYPOINTS, the podcast of fly fishing travel. With helpful travel tips, news and events, destination profiles, great stories, and expert advice from seasoned and experienced traveling anglers, this is your backstage pass to the world of fishing travel. WAYPOINTS is fueled by adventure and brought to you by Yellow Dog Flyfishing, a hands-on specialty travel and booking company that delivers the industry's very best insider knowledge, logistical support, and trip preparation. Freshwater or saltwater, international or domestic, Yellow Dog has you covered. And now your host, Yellow Dog founder and director, Jim Klug.
Welcome back to WAYPOINTS. Well, we are in the middle of some pretty interesting times here in America. Working from home, maintaining our social distances, sheltering in place, and not traveling to fish. Damn it! But, that is largely a first world problem, and one that we can deal with in the short term, certainly. We are seeing that every industry and every small business in the world of fishing and outdoor recreation and well beyond all have been face-punched by this pandemic, and the reality is setting in that the bounce back and recovery period is probably going to take some time. As I often do with the opening here on WAYPOINTS, I'm going to throw in a couple of disclaimers as we start this episode. So first off, we're doing the show at the height of the pandemic and what is basically a nationwide lockdown here in the U.S., and of course, we're all aware that things are changing on a daily and even hourly basis. That means that there will be somewhat of a timestamp on some of the things that we're going to talk about. Some of the info and facts that we're including in the show may be out of date or different in the weeks and months ahead. And God willing, things will be different, hopefully in an improved way. But we need to remember that this too shall pass. We're hearing that a lot lately. But while we're waiting this out, we're going to continue to record new episodes in the weeks ahead because we figure that if everyone is sheltering in place anyway, then we may as well continue to deliver new Quarantine Chronicle WAYPOINTS episodes as a way for the traveling angler to stay connected to the world of fishing. So the second thing I want to say as we get started is that we're going to have some very open discussions about how this situation has and will change the world of destination angling, what businesses and fly fishing operations are doing to survive, and how our lodges, agents, and traveling anglers are handling things and behaving. We'll talk about the conduct and expectations that can be detrimental and damaging to the fly fishing community and to the network of destinations and lodges that so many of us love and care about. And just maybe a few of the things that my guests have to say and some of our conversations on this program today will remind anglers and travelers that as big as this thing has become, that we are all in this together. Now, if you're listening to this show, chances are good you are an angler. And beyond that, you're likely someone who travels to fish, seeking out and always looking forward to the next journey and the next great adventure. You're probably someone who loves the places that fishing takes us, and you likely care about the people that you meet along these journeys. We're talking about all of the guides and the lodge employees that you've met and come to know over the years. The hostess in the lodge dining room that brings you that first cup of hot coffee each morning. Your flats guide who, over the years, has transitioned from a patient instructor to a trusted friend. And of course, the bartender that's waiting for you with a cold drink when you walk off the skiff at the end of the day, more than ready to listen to your BS as you recount your stories of angling glory. There are so many people that we meet and spend time with all over the world that collectively are the fly fishing industry, the very fabric of destination travel and angling. We all know that fly fishing is a small sport and a relatively small business, but most of all, it's a small community. So I'm lucky enough to be joined today in our temporary outside recording studios with plenty of social distancing and separation by two good friends, seasoned veterans in the fly fishing industry, and a couple of guys that always have their fingers on the pulse of not only the sport itself, but also on the business of fishing and destination angling. My first guest today is Ben Bulis, the president of the American Fly Fishing Trade Association, better known as AFTA. Ben has been the president and CEO of AFTA since the spring of 2012, and under his leadership, the association has grown to record levels. A native of New Hampshire, Ben now lives in Bozeman, Montana with his family. My second guest today is Bryan Gregson, a legendary fishing photographer and world traveler. Also based in Bozeman, Bryan travels the globe working on assignments in some of the most remote corners of the planet. Known for his unique vision and storytelling abilities, Bryan is the humbled recipient of numerous awards, and his work has been featured in publications and ad campaigns for Patagonia, Volvo, Nat Geo, Yellow Dog, 3M, The Drake, countless magazines, ads, and film projects. Bryan has been there, done that, and certainly photographed it. So, guys, welcome to the show, and thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
It's a little cold out here in Montana, but we're doing this outside to be responsible and follow the rules, and appreciate you guys sitting here with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
Ben Bulis, let me get started with you. Tell us and give our listeners a quick rundown of what AFTA does and what the organization's mission is.
So AFTA is the sole trade association for the fly fishing industry. We have members across the country in all 50 states and to be honest with you, across the globe. Many of the lodges that you referred to before are members of AFTA, and they've been longtime supporters of the association. So AFTA's goal or mission is to guide the sustainable growth of the fishing industry through trade development and stewardship. And we have two pillars that we kind of always fall back upon to make sure that we're doing our job correctly. And so we do that by advocating for the fly fishing industry and empowering our members to improve their businesses through collaboration, education, and building community. And then the second one, which is near and dear to all of our heart here, is advocating for healthy fisheries.
Well, that's great. And in full transparency, I was a board member on AFTA for about 7 years. So, it's an important organization. Most of our listeners, Ben, are travelers. They're recreational fishermen. They're not necessarily in the business of fly fishing, but they certainly depend, even if they're kind of unaware of it sometimes, on this tight-knit industry and this infrastructure that is the business of fly fishing. And I want to come back and talk with you more about what you're hearing from all the fly shops around the countries, the manufacturers, reps, guides, domestic outfitters from all across the country. But first, I want to turn to Bryan here and ask about some of your recent travels. BG, you just made it home from what was pretty much the last flight out of Argentina as this entire coronavirus tsunami hit us all a couple weeks ago. I think in talking with you and texting that day, you were literally like on the last flight out of Buenos Aires.
I believe I had actually got the last plane seat out of BA.
That must have been kind of an interesting trip. You were down there for like a month working, visiting lodges, photographing. All was normal. All systems go when you went down there. No big deal. You come home a month later. What was it like coming back to the States?
It was kind of hard to get a grasp on what was actually happening. We're in a very rural area, and the local police department came to the lodge, and they started asking basically how long we'd been there for. And I had a passport stamp. I'd been there since the 2nd of February. And they wanted an itinerary of everybody who'd been there, where they're from. And up until this point, I had no news of what was going on. So once we had that, we started investigating a little bit. I wasn't really too worried, to be honest with you. We finished up our work there, went to the next lodge, and that's kind of when things were kind of getting a little spicy. Their government basically made a point to tell all U.S. citizens to leave, and we had 2 days to get out of town, and luckily I got a plane ticket and got out of there. I had pretty easy sailing coming home. I mean, the plane internationally was packed, but once I got to the U.S., I mean, it was very spatially seated, which was nice. I heard horror stories of TSA checkpoints taking 6 hours, 8 hours. We got to Atlanta, and it was five minutes max.
Yeah, but entering a very different world than the one you left.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was at the time in Buenos Aires, it wasn't really panic mode yet. I just knew that was in a city of 20 million people. I just wanted to kind of get home to Montana, where it's nice and quiet. And then once you got to the U.S., you definitely felt a little more antsy.
Well, it's been interesting. I mean, you think back to the beginning of March when really all this kind of hit heavy here in the States. And here we are now, only a handful of weeks later, the beginning of April. How much has changed?
Right. Just a few short weeks, it went from not really anybody to worry to a major concern.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you a few questions, Jim, specific to destination angling. What are you seeing from the Yellow Dog's perspective?
Well, as I said, it's been an interesting month. There's no doubt about it. Like everyone in destination angling, we've been crushed as a business. And we've literally sat here and watched the travel industry as a whole collapse. And I don't, pretend that we've got it worse than anyone else. I mean, small businesses all over the country are suffering. Most of the people who are going to be listening to this episode are suffering, and they've been impacted by it. I think in the beginning, a lot of us, watched the news and thought, okay, maybe this is a little bit like a big winter weather event, and it's going to take a few weeks, and then we'll be on to the next big event. That's kind of the American mindset in a lot of ways. But now it's really sunk in that, man, this is something the likes of which hasn't been seen in generations. We've never seen it in our lifetime, certainly, and hopefully never will again, although, who knows. But yeah, it's been a difficult time for the travel industry, and it's been a very stressful time for the traveling angler. I mean, there are so many people that during this spring season, this is when people head to the saltwater. We have had hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of trips that have been impacted in this quarter alone. And so we've got everybody that's had their trip planned to the Seychelles, or the tail end down in Patagonia, or the beginning of the Bahamas and Belize season when things really ramp up and start to get busy. All of those trips have been impacted. They've all been canceled. And again, because it's such an unprecedented time, all of the lodges and the outfitters and the business of fly fishing travel is scrambling to try to figure out how to deal with this in a way that allows a lot of these independent businesses to survive. And
Right.
and that's the bottom line. Everyone is very much in survival mode right now. And again, we're not reading off a script. We're in uncharted waters here, and everybody is trying to figure it out as it continues to develop.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult times for everybody. How are the destinations and the fishing lodges doing with all this? Or better yet, can you give us a little status report for the destination angling as a whole?
Well, that's a great question, Brian. And no one is faring well right now. And I guess what I would say is, put it in the perspective of a lodge, let's say, in Belize, for example. The way it works when someone books a trip, and I think this is worth mentioning, is let's say you decide you want to go bone fishing in Belize. You got your group of buddies. So it might be 8 months out, might be 15 months out. You look at your calendars, you pick your dates, you want the great guides, you want, good moon phases, good tides, you want all the conditions. And so you do your job as a traveling angler to start your planning early. You commit to the dates, and then you pay what is typically a 50% deposit that goes down to reserve your spots and reserve and hold your guides. At that point in time, let's say you book through Yellow Dog or another agent, we take that entire deposit and that gets sent to the lodges, right? They have all that money. Now, the lodge uses that money for operations to get them going for the season, for new gear, new equipment, maybe new boats for the guides. They stock up for the season ahead. They've basically spent that money to ramp things up for the coming busy season. Well, what's happened now is they've lost this entire season, okay? And so they're trying to figure out how to offer fair solutions to customers in a way that allows them to stay in business. And a lot of people, I think, aren't always aware of how this works, but we've dealt with a lot of clients say, well, clearly I can't go on my Belize trip in late March, so I just need a refund. I want my money back, and I want to be made whole in this whole situation. And we get it. As a booking agent, we get it. Our job is to look out for and protect the interests of the traveling angler. They're our clients. We're their agent, and that's our job, is to look out for them. But the reality is that the terms and conditions and the way this is dealt with is dictated by the lodges and the outfitters. They set the terms. And when they're looking at a situation where they can't possibly survive if they just issue sweeping refunds, they have in turn had to basically adapt their terms and say, well, we can't give a refund. And most of them have those terms and conditions in place anyway, right? Maybe they've dealt with hurricanes before, they've dealt with airline strikes, whatever it is. They're typically covered with terms and conditions that protect them, but they're literally saying, look, we can't give refunds. It's not even in the realm of possibility here. We can't even discuss it. It's not going to happen. What we can do is look at rolling your dates forward. We can talk about giving a trip credit of some sort. Now, in turn, the traveling angler is saying, well, hold on. this isn't my fault. I just want to be made whole. I just need a refund and we're all good. But the reality is with very few exceptions, that's just not going to happen. And those people say, well, that's not fair. And, at this point, after dealing with, a month of cancellation calls and trying to find solutions, the reality is it's not fair. We get it. It's not fair for anybody. And I think what people are starting to realize in the beginning, they were like, well, I just want to be made whole. I don't want to have to feel the pain or share the pain in this. I just need my money back and I'm good. But people are starting to understand that really no one's going to be made whole in this, and everyone's going to have to share the pain a little bit.
So, Jim, is from your clients' perspective that you speak with, do a lot of them don't understand or have a misconception of where that money goes and how it gets utilized? Do they think that you guys are holding on to this?
What about trip insurance?
Well, two really good questions. Ben, I'll answer your question first. I think a lot of people were kind of unaware of how that works. And oftentimes when you have a conversation with them and you explain it to them and talk about, the operating costs for the year ahead for these lodges, the fact that this money gets pushed forward, just like it does with so many small businesses, people begin to understand. The trip insurance question, Bryan, is a great one because here's the dynamic of how it works. All right. Again, you book your trip well in advance. You get, great guides, great dates. You get your deposit in on time. Your trip is secured. And because the lodge and because an agent like Yellow Dog, we really push the benefits of having trip insurance to protect your investment. You say, okay, I'll buy a trip insurance policy. So you, as the traveling angler, have done everything right. Okay. You've done everything the way you're supposed to do it. And all of a sudden, what's happening now is we're seeing a lot of trip insurance companies say, well, yeah, but in the fine print down at the very bottom of, page 19 of your policy, it says we don't cover pandemics, fear of travel, this type of cataclysmic world event. Sorry, but that's not a covered reason. And again, that's really not fair. But I go back to the point where 6 months ago, if I had said, hey, Ben, or hey, Bryan, here's a trip insurance policy. It covers you against hurricanes, airlines not flying, the lodge going broke and closing, big time weather events, you getting hurt, not being able to go on your trip, your business reasons that preclude you from going on this trip. Here's 18 things it does cover you for. You'd say, okay, well, that covers just about everything. I say, but it doesn't cover against worldwide pandemics. Well, okay, well, what are the odds that that's going to happen, right? You would go ahead with it anyway. But the sad reality is now people are feeling really frustrated because trip insurance is not providing the solutions that we all anticipated it would.
Yeah, it seems like we're all in this boat together, like it or not.
It gets back to what we said a minute ago. Everyone is feeling the pain on this, and everyone is going to have to take a little bite of that sandwich, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I'm just as guilty as some of your clients. I mean, I've been on a dozen Yellow Dog trips, and I see that, insurance that comes through, and I'm like, travel insurance, trip insurance? And I think I've purchased it once when we went to Christmas Island the first time.
Yeah. And, it's still a great thing to have because...
Oh, without a doubt.
The chances of something slightly more routine than the coronavirus pandemic happening, those odds are very good. We talk to people all the time. Hey, I'm supposed to leave on my trip tomorrow. My son had an injury in Little League and broke his ankle. I don't think I can go on this trip. Boom, covered. Again, job related, a hurricane that hits the Caribbean, those are covered reasons. And so trip insurance makes sense. But getting back to what we said a few minutes ago, uncharted waters here. And a lot of people are realizing that pandemics are not necessarily covered with a whole lot of these policies. But, I would say that the lodges are doing their best to stay in business, Bryan, to your question. Sadly, I think when all of this is said and done, and Ben, I'm going to ask you more about this here in a few minutes with regards to other entities in the fly fishing industry. But sadly, I think we are going to see lodges that close and outfitting operations that go out of business and other fly fishing related businesses that are not here when we all emerge from this. I think that's a reality. It's one of the reasons the government's scrambling to try to give trillions of dollars away. But keep in mind, if you're a lodge in Belize or the Bahamas or Argentina or the Seychelles or Honduras, there's no government bailout. No one is coming to save you. And so these guys are just trying to figure out how to survive. And what I'm telling people is, let's take a step back and realize the importance of having this infrastructure. Again, you're probably listening to the show because you love the places that fishing takes you. And it's important to all of us that these places are here when this ends and passes. And we know it will. A lot of question about how long that's going to take, but we want that infrastructure there on the other side because this is what we love to do. And we need those businesses to survive. And really that's what it gets down to. The terms that they're offering, the rollover solutions and future trip credit solutions, a lot of them are far from perfect. There's no doubt about it. But, they're trying their best to survive just like everybody with a small business is right now.
Yeah. And those people too, that's our community, right? Those are our friends, and essentially they become our families.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all in it together, like it or not, no matter where we're at in the world.
Yeah, fly fishing is a small community. You're absolutely right, Ben. And you tend to know a lot of these people. And I talk to our clients about this that have been, impacted, and there is some levels of frustration with people. And again, we get it because it isn't fair. But we start talking about their favorite guide. There's a reason you booked them 18 months out because it's so important for you to fish with that guide. And think about what they're going through right now. Their seasons are gone. Their lodges are closed. They don't have government
it's
programs.
Devastating. Absolutely.
In every sense of the word.
Have you guys heard that recent fly fishing public service announcement from Andy Mills, the tarpon guide?
Yeah, I have. And I would encourage people, if you haven't listened to it, it's like a 70-second deal.
It's awesome.
It's really quick. Yeah. If you go on the Yellow Dog site, we have a whole COVID-19 page in the main menu, and we posted this. And I want to talk about that on the back end, but let's listen to Andy's public service announcement right now, because I think it speaks to and really hits home on some of these things we're talking about. Let's give it a quick listen.
Hello, everybody. I hope this public service announcement doesn't fall upon deaf ears. And I'm speaking out right now on behalf of all the guides around this country and around the world, for that matter, because a lot of anglers are having to cancel that fishing trip. Let's not forget that these guides cannot rebook right now because there is no travel and everybody's being canceled. And let's too not forget that these guides really provide a great service in the fact that they take us into their little paradise of special flora and fauna and tides and a fishery that we all are captivated by. And they make our lives so much better when we are in their presence on their boats for that period of time. So what I want to do right now is ask all of you anglers out there, if you have had to cancel your trip, take a closer look at your pocketbook and see whether or not you can send them that check. Because right now it's a very crucial, important time for these guys. Again, they cannot rebook. And this window gets them through the whole year. This next phase of this spring and summer is so important. So if you can't afford the full check, maybe 50%, give something. Let's stand together as brothers and sisters and do the right thing.
So that was Andy Mill. A lot of you guys know him as a legendary tarpon angler, a big tournament saltwater angler, and somebody who's been in the industry a long time. He's got a lot of relationships, a lot of connections, and he loves our sport, and he really has a connection to that community we're talking about. And I think he puts out a lot of wise words there about thinking about everyone who's being impacted.
Yeah, he's a smart guy. He's been around the block. He's been in it for a long time.
Yeah, and I commend Andy for putting that out there.
Absolutely.
We've had a lot of people that have been upset, and when we've said, hey, check out this service announcement from Andy and see what you think, and they've called back and said, you know what, that is spot on. That is really good. And we're all pretty freaked out by this deal. We're all overwhelmed, and on top of that, we're all locked in our homes with for endless weeks. And so tensions are high and nerves are frayed and people are frustrated. We get that. But
the other thing too, I think a lot of the angling public don't realize how small of a community and how small of an industry the fly fishing industry really is. And to have Andy come out and make a statement like that, it's very empowering.
That's right. Well, we talked about the many traveling anglers who have lost trips, have had trips delayed, canceled, rescheduled by this, and they're frustrated by an inability to travel and the fact that not every independent lodge or small business or outfitter can make them whole on a lost trip. And what we're telling people, one, when you book through an agent like Yellow Dog, our job is to find solutions, and we're working on it. And they're not immediate. Sometimes we're saying, well, look, be patient, give us time. we're not going to forget that we need to, find a solution and continue to improve that solution the best we can. And that's all we're working on right now. I mean, that is our sole focus. We are no longer at this point in time, for the foreseeable future, we're not a booking company anymore. We are a cancellation bureau, because people aren't taking trips right now. They're scrambling to reschedule and cancel and rebook trips for the future. But we get it. We're trying to provide those solutions. But what I would tell people are a couple of important things. One is be patient, because none of us saw this coming, and everybody is trying to do the right thing and find answers that take care of customers and clients, because without the customers and clients there on the other side, there's no point in working hard to save a business, right? You got to be able to depend on those customers when we emerge from this. But, be patient. Know that nobody is trying to be difficult or trying not to provide acceptable solutions. And, the other thing that I've said a lot is be kind. Bryan, you said it a minute ago, we're all in this together, and be nice, be decent. Remember that, this is fly fishing, and your vacation time is so important, and your trip investment, oftentimes it's significant and it means something. And I wouldn't for a second, make light of that or say that that's not important. But, in the grand scheme of things, look at what's going on in the rest of the world. Imagine what, some of these first responders and hospital workers are doing. Imagine how frustrating it must be to try to source PPE and stay ahead of this unbelievable curve that's going on right now. I mean, those are the big problems.
Yes.
At the end of the day, this is fishing.
Correct.
And while the trips and the trip investments and the reservations are so important to everyone that loves to travel, this will be here when it's all said and done. And the lodges and the booking agents and the guides and the outfitters are going to do their very best to provide acceptable solutions. But be patient and be kind, and let's not forget about that.
Yeah, empathy goes a long way.
Yeah, yes. And we kind of need to be more responsible and be nicer and more compassionate. Everybody's in a giant mess. We're just lucky we're in Montana at this point.
Yeah. And it's been interesting, Bryan, to that point, is that, 4 weeks ago, even 3 weeks ago, we saw a lot of people coming in pretty hot on this. And again, I don't blame them. I mean, this is scary. It's frustrating. And I think people were not really understanding about the fact that they might not be made whole or might not get exactly what they want. But now a few weeks have gone by, and I have seen everybody really calm down, and people are being nicer and they're getting it. We were having, a handful of clients that were calling into Yellow Dog pretty hot. And 3 weeks later, that client calls back and says, you know what, I'm not calling for any reason other than just see how you guys are doing. And we hope you're okay. We hope you're staying safe. And hey, fishing will be here. I get it. So thanks. And I have seen this massive swing in that patience level, and the fact that people now understand, well, this is a little bigger than we thought it might have been in the beginning.
Yeah, it's enormous.
Well, Ben, I want to shift directions just a little bit, and I want to talk to you about some of the specific businesses in the fly fishing industry. And let me ask you about what you're hearing and the reports that you've been receiving as the president of AFTA. First off, we all know that the specialty fly shops all throughout our country, that these retailers, these shops, they are the backbone of this sport. How are the retailers that you've been talking to over these past few weeks, how are they faring? I mean, March was obviously tough, but what's going on with some of these shops?
Yeah, Jim, thanks. And you're 100% correct. The fly fishing retailers are the heart, the backbone and the heartbeat of our industry. And it's a difficult question to answer because it depends on which state you're in. Each state has different rules, and depending upon what the governor has come down with, shelter in place, or even if fishing in a state is considered an essential business. There are some states where that is considered, fishing is considered essential.
You're not going to get any argument from the listeners on this show.
Yeah, I know. I know that. So, and like I said, it just depends on which state you're from. So, like here in Montana, our governor put in a shelter in place, and all non-essential businesses have to close. So what that means for a fly shop here in Montana is that you can't even do curbside pickup any longer at your business, but you still can do online sales and ship it. Now, we at AFTA just today, about 2 hours ago, sent a letter to all 50 governors across the country, asking them to reevaluate what is considered essential, because as we all know, the great outdoors is one of the best remedies, for people that are stuck inside and, mental well-being. So even if they can allow fishing retailers to do curbside pickup, I mean, there are ways to do it that you will not be, spreading this disease or virus, excuse me. So there's ways of, someone calls in and orders something, they package it up, those fly shop owner, worker, whoever's in there, and is adhering to the CDC requirements. You can wipe it down with Clorox wipes and put it out on a table, and then the customer can come up and pick it up, and then you can wipe down that table again. So there are ways around it, and so we would hope that is what will eventually happen, because it is important for them.
And you nailed it. I mean, and again, different states, different situations. I've talked to a lot of clients that are literally stuck on the 28th floor of their, high-rise apartment building in Chicago, and they're, or New York, and they're not necessarily getting outside. But a lot of the country can. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing where you can, get away from people, get outside. It's so important for mental health, for physical health. And we've talked a lot about this last few weeks, the social distancing regulations of 6 feet, I think soon to go to 10 feet. But I mean, fly fishing is the original social distancing pastime. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to be within 10 feet of another angler. I mean, you're outraged if you're within, 100 yards of another angler.
I mean, even from the guiding aspect of it, if you're on a walkway, there's ways to still social distance. I mean,
yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
You need,
I'll meet you at the boat ramp.
Yeah, I'll meet you at the boat ramp.
I'll stay over here.
Bring your own food. We're not going to touch anything. Mm-hmm. There's ways to wipe everything down. You can even wear gloves if you have to. Right. And then if a customer needs a new leader or a tippet, I mean, like you said, it is the ultimate social distancing sport. You just put the rod down, you're 10 feet away.
Exactly.
And you can help your client out. I mean, so there's ways around it. And I think that's something that we need to explore, to make sure that, like you said, these guides and outfitters and these fly shops are still here in the future.
And crazy times. I read the other day that Washington State closed all recreational fishing.
I read that too.
Yeah, they did.
And, I know for me personally, we're still kind of in the midst of winter here in Montana. One sunny day followed by 7 inches of snow the next. But, 3 times over the last 10 days, I've been able to take my kids out to the Gallatin or the Madison, do our thing. We're not around other people, but thank God we have that resource. And I mean, it's really helping right now.
Yeah. I mean, you don't even have to go into the convenience store. You can get things delivered to your house as far as food and groceries go.
That's right.
And then
buy your license online.
Buy your license online, and if you need to get fuel, you wear gloves.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's right.
There's ways around it.
Any positives you're hearing from any of your retail shops, Ben? I mean, has anybody come up with like cool and innovative ways to get through this, or to help protect their business and most importantly, service their customers?
Yeah. Bryan and Colby Troll well.
Yeah, Mossy Creek Fly Shop in Virginia.
Harrisonburg, Virginia.
Yeah.
They had a really cool thing that they were doing at their shop, and it was a drive-up window. So it was reminiscent of, that opening scene in Caddyshack when, God, I forget his name, but the bald guy or the bad guy was behind the window, and the other kid asked for a Coke, and he said it's $3.25, and he's like, no, I'm not paying for that. He's like, well, no Coke for you. And so it was looked similar. It was red. Their building is red, and they had a window open, and somebody was standing there. So I don't think that they can do that anymore, but they can still do curbside pickup. They have one person in the shop at a time, and they're Cloroxing everything every day. And so, that employee's in there for like 12 hours, pulling flies and leader and whatever else, stringing up, reels. So they're still out there, doing well. The same, here in Montana, I talked to a couple of retailers. They're still doing online sales. It's nothing like it was before. But I will say that, Jim, to your point, where people are kind of, understanding and being compassionate now, those retailers, their clients are understanding of what's going on.
Well, that's good to hear. And we're hearing a lot about, for instance, the restaurant industry, which is getting gutted. I read a statistic that said, 1 in 3 restaurants will not survive this. They will be out of business, could be higher.
Yeah.
But they're trying to get innovative with gift cards and takeout orders and whatnot. And they say, hey, if you love a restaurant, make a point of supporting them. And the same thing goes for a fly shop. If you love your fly shop, do that online order. Maybe step up and buy that rod or that new pair of waders that you were maybe waiting on, because that'll help. That'll help them get through this.
Oh, well, and a lot of the manufacturers also have lowered their prices.
Well, and I want to ask about that too. So manufacturers, that's a whole different ball game than the fly shops. How are they faring through all this?
Again, it depends on which state you're in. All of the major rod manufacturers have ceased production that I've spoken to. But they have a supply. They have enough supply on hand that they can ship out to those retailers. A lot of them that I've spoken to, I spoke to John Woolstenholme this morning from Thomas & Thomas, and they're thinking about just doing a drop shipment where, the retailer, somebody buys it, the retailer, puts in the order, and they're just going to ship it directly to the customer, and the shop is still going to get credit for that sale, and just to keep everybody in business.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We're all in this together. And we were talking a little bit earlier today, guys, about some of these fly fishing manufacturers that actually pivoted into providing PPE and medical gear when it's so needed right now. And they have that ability. We've seen it with a lot of different types of manufacturing, from the auto companies on down, that are basically saying, hey, we need to help with this effort. Bryan, you were talking earlier, Echo fly rods, Ray Jeff, those guys have been doing it.
Yeah, I saw Tim making stuff with his 3D printer. Some
awesome.
sort of breathing device that you can add your filters in. I thought it was awesome.
Sims is doing the same thing, Ben.
Yeah, benefit of made in America waders, right? They've got the skills there and the people to produce. They're producing Gore-Tex gowns for hospitals. Wow. I mean, I talked to Casey Walsh from Sims earlier today, and I didn't know that, and he mentioned that. So, I mean,
they're providing
again,
hundreds of these things,
thousands. Yeah, they're trying to. He said this is their first week, and I think he said that they're trying to produce 1,000 this week and then ramp it up next week. And so again, storied brand in the fly fishing industry, made in America. They're doing everything that they possibly can to help as well.
Well, I think a lot of people are stepping up right now, and it's good to see. And you certainly want to see these businesses survive this, because it is that infrastructure that as anglers we all depend on. Yes. Whether we're aware of it or not.
Right.
The one thing that I thought was really cool that came out from this CARES Act was that, independent outfitters and guides, as a independent, you weren't eligible for
the payroll protection.
Right.
Yeah.
And they put that in there that they are eligible for that. So it's great to see that.
As independent contractors.
As an independent contractor, you can get unemployment benefits.
That's good.
Well, let's ask about this. We deal with a lot of lodges, guides, and outfitters all over the world at Yellow Dog, but there are a ton of domestic guides, independent contractors, outfitters that are AFTA members. What are you hearing from these guys?
It all depends where they're located regionally right now. Like, as we know, here in Montana, we're still, like you said, 7 inches of snow, 50 degrees one day.
Season really hasn't started yet.
No, it hasn't really started yet. But they're getting some cancellations now. There's no doubt about it. But our friends in the Southeast, they're just devastated.
Yeah, all the tarpon guides and the Keys and throughout Florida, they've lost their season.
It's part of the travel industry, right? I mean, there people travel to go down there, and they're getting decimated. I mean, cancellations after cancellations, and people don't realize again that the industry is really small. And if you've got that personal relationship with that guide, I mean, Bruce Chard, for instance, talked to him the other day. Great guide. He's been guiding for 25 years, 30 years.
Yeah, down in Florida.
He's calling his clients and talking to them, and some of them he's been fishing for 30 years, and they get it and they understand. And it's not a fishing guide; it's that family member who's pulling you and one of your good friends.
Yeah, and we've seen a number of such amazing examples of doing right by your guide. We had a couple that was booked back to El Pescador in Belize a couple weeks ago. They couldn't go, but they, every year they go down, they fish with their same guide, Cesar, down there the whole time. They rolled the trip over, but they scratched a check, sent it to us, and asked us to get it to the lodge for the full tip of what that week would have been.
Wow, that's awesome.
And it gets back to what Andy Mill said a couple minutes ago in the piece that we just played. Not everybody is in a position to eat a guide trip or God forbid, eat a bone fishing week somewhere,
Right. Yeah.
a lodge package. But some people are. And, if you have that economic wherewithal to maybe do something kind for a guide or an outfitter or even the lodge staff, that's going to be remembered. And, that brings up an interesting thing because luckily like 90% of the people we've been dealing with throughout all this have been very, very kind and understanding and patient. But, we've dealt with some difficult people too. But, and somebody asked me the other day, it's like, oh, are you keeping a list? Are you keeping a list of like, the people that are difficult and are you going to remember this? And my response is I am keeping a list, but it's not that list. I'm keeping a list of the people that are unbelievably kind and caring and considerate. And I can tell you that's something, in 20 years of business, I've been building up this company. I will never forget that. And moving forward, I can tell you when those people call, they are going to be taken care of, and that will always, always be remembered. I mean, I've almost been brought to tears by some of these acts of kindness that people have demonstrated. And, this isn't over, and it's probably going to get a bit worse. And so
for sure.
Again, the importance of doing that and those little things, it really, really adds up.
So there's a really interesting story that's happening right now. A gentleman by the name of Cody Richardson, Cody's Fish.
Yeah, he's out of Wyoming.
Yeah.
I think is that the guy that does the
He does the
artwork?
license plate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw him on Major Network, I think.
He was on Tucker Carlson picked him up.
Right. How awesome.
So what he's doing is if you purchase a piece of artwork from him, he is going to put 30. You get to choose as the customer your favorite guide, and he is going to cut a check for 30% of the artwork and send it to that guide.
That's awesome. What's the name of this company, Ben?
It's called Cody's Fish.
Cody's Fish. You can Google it, license plate art.
Yeah.
I've got one hanging inside by the office that is just awesome. He does great work. And we're seeing a lot of examples of that. And again, that's where the fly fishing community is rallying together to try to take care of their own. And it's a great opportunity for anglers, destination anglers, people that love this sport to get involved and make a difference.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, I have a big question for you, Ben, and I know this is hard to answer, but in your opinion, how does this whole thing end up for the business of fly fishing? What does the near future and the year ahead look like for all of these small businesses within fly fishing?
It is a tough question, and it's a tough question for a couple of reasons. First, it's, our friends that are, a lot of them might not be here after this is all done. But I think it all depends what happens in the next month. Depending upon, how this virus spreads or if it doesn't spread anymore, and we're able to get back to normal. I don't believe that to be the true, what's going to happen. Just what I see on TV and what I read, but we will survive. The fly fishing industry will survive. The landscape might look completely different, but I mean, we will still come back and we will be fishing again at some point in time in the future. I mean, I don't know what to think. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if anybody knows what it's going to look like, any industry for that matter, but we are resilient. We've gone through major catastrophes in the past, whether if it's financial or, September 11th. And the industry has bounced back, and it bounces back stronger than it was before.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's two kind of interesting things to talk about related to that. One is, you take a fishery like the Florida Keys or some of the rivers in the U.S. West or even the flats in the Caribbean, and you rest them for half a year or an entire busy season. Imagine what that fishing is going to be like the year. Aaron Adams from BTT just did a whole article about this.
Really?
About what the what to expect when this is said and done from the fishery just in the Keys alone for tarpon. So, there's not a lot of silver linings right now, but that might be one of them. But the second thing I would mention is, we talked a few minutes ago about the importance of getting outside and still being able to fish. if this doesn't show you the importance of public lands and access.
Right.
And the ability to get out and enjoy these places and I don't know what does. And that is obviously a hot topic in politics these days. And it seems like something that as anglers, both as recreational anglers or if you're in the business of fishing, it's something we're constantly having to battle, right? We're constantly having to step up and speak out for these resources and for public lands. And my God, this shows you the importance. If nothing else does, this certainly does.
Yeah, this is, as an American, it's your birthright. I mean, you get to go out and recreate on your land that, you own.
Absolutely. It's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now more so than ever, I think.
I agree.
Well, Bryan, let me shift gears a little bit and come back to you on this. So one thing that we know is that pretty much all of America is stuck inside right now for the most part. A lot of screen time now and in the weeks ahead. Can fly fishermen who are cooped up and unable to take that big trip that they were looking forward to, or even get out on the water in some of these, big cities and some of these urban areas, can they find some solace or a possible escape online right now? Talk to us a little bit about the resources that are out there. And if you're a homebound, frustrated angler, what can you do to kind of keep that stoke alive?
I think there's a lot of content being made right now. And to be honest, there's been a lot of content throughout the last 10 years, whether we've been too busy to actually see any of that and been out experiencing angling for ourselves. Or seen it, but yeah, there's tons and tons and tons. The fly tires they're always the unsung hero. They're the masses, but they have some awesome tutorials, Instagram live feeds. It's very personable. Some of the big names that you've always heard of are now just sitting at home too, just like you. There's a lot of big companies that have released films. I know Confluence Films has or is going to be releasing some of those films. I know that Red Gold from Felt Soul Media was released. I know that there's stuff from all kinds of stuff on Amazon Prime too.
Yeah, and even movies that might be 5-10 years old are now being re-released, made accessible, free downloads, that kind of thing that can help you feed the fix.
It's been cool too that I've seen a lot of manufacturers in the industry have now been doing like daytime Facebook Live and talk about, rod design and how they got to this rod and, the evolution of their series of lines and, a lot of fly tying videos as well. So it's kind of been cool to see that as well.
Well, you might keep anglers off the water for a short period of time, but you're not going to keep them from being interested and wanting to immerse themselves.
I'm sure there's a lot of interesting flies being tied up right now, and who knows what that means for the future.
That's right. Well, and we have a platform on the Yellow Dog website called Yellow Dog TV that has hundreds of videos and tutorials and instructional pieces and interviews. And we really kind of beefed that up and have been pushing that out the last couple of weeks. And I think that's getting record numbers. I mean, people are stuck inside, but they want to stay involved.
You can only watch E.T. so many times.
Great movie, by the way. That's
one of my favorites.
Well, I want to thank you guys for being here today. It's a good conversation to have. And, it's an important conversation to have because we could, continue to talk about, amazing destinations and catching big fish. But, the reality is we're dealing with something that is significant and serious and unprecedented right now. And so I appreciate you guys being willing to sit down at recognized intervals outside here, but have this conversation with me. So
too bad we can't show everyone this setup right now.
Yeah, I know. We should get a picture and post that. But, in closing, I do want to share a few important thoughts for all of our listeners and for really everyone that cares about this sport and more importantly, the people whose livelihoods depend on this sport. For those of you who are wondering what you can do to support the many lodges, guides, outfitters, lodge employees, booking agents, others in the world of fishing, there are a few simple and easy things that honestly will help. And I'll touch on three right there. First, we said it before, but be patient. Try to empathize with what the tourism, travel, and lodge industry, like so many other small businesses right now, what all of these people are going through. Refunds when it comes to trips are not going to be possible in so many cases, especially when a family-owned lodge received payment to reserve a trip many months in advance. We talked about that. Those funds have already been used for operations, guide salaries, payroll, equipment, and more. Future credits may be possible in some cases, but also be aware that, trip rescheduling and rolling things over also creates the inability to book new business for the next season. So it's a tough situation for these lodges, guides, and outfitters to be in. And so number one, be patient. Number two, we said this a number of times, be kind. We touched on this, but it's so important. As the world continues to lose its mind and stress levels stay high, everyone needs to remember that the vast majority of people that work in fly fishing are nice people. Everybody truly wants nothing more than to deliver positive experiences and solutions, great options whenever possible. But remember that, when you're on the phone dealing with a cancellation situation or a rebooking, you're not talking to the cable company. You're not talking to some call center in a far off country with someone that doesn't really care and is just getting paid by the hour to listen to you complain. You're talking to and working with the same people that you've always talked to and the ones that have always taken care of you. So keep that in mind and be kind. And finally, number three, be proactive. Don't be afraid to book your future trips now. We talked about, the gift cards for restaurants and what people are doing to support small businesses, but there is no reason that anglers can't be looking to schedule trips for the coming year and even beyond that. We all realize that this situation will pass and eventually the world will reopen. And just as your small local retailers are encouraging people to stay involved and support those businesses, future bookings and future trip reservations and future guide days will help our industry more than you know. Well, that's it for this episode of Waypoints, the podcast that is 100% dedicated to travel, adventure, and exploration. As I said in our last program, we know that this is a very tough time for the travel industry and for small businesses everywhere. It's a confusing time to be a world traveler, and we're all looking for answers. But remember the importance of keeping things in perspective and the importance of staying positive, because in the end, we are all in this together. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the water.
This has been another episode of Waypoints, the podcast of fly fishing travel and adventure angling. Thank you for joining us, and be sure to visit yellowdogflyfishing.com for more trip updates, travel news, expert advice, and adventure profiles.